We covered the work of Hermann Wolfgang Zahn in episode 344. Today we will cover his rare, almost impossible to find novel, his 1930 Das Wallmüllerhaus. Businessman Hans Barner is travelling via train to a business conference in Munich. However, a pretty young girl tells him to go look over the old town she's visiting, where he coincidentally grew up. Going through the town, he sees a strange old man through a window that no one else can see, and who vanishes when Barner tries to follow. This man points him in the direction of a seedy pub, and by pure chance he sits down next to Werner North, his old friend from university. After some wine, North explains why he came back, after years of travelling abroad, having left Germany due to a woman and not feeling the need to return until now. Some weeks prior, he had been granted access to the tomb of an ancient Egyptian princess, which no other European was supposed to have ever had, and after entering he immediately finds an ad in a German newspaper. This piece of paper, however, tells him an old house in his native town is for sale, and he is so intrigued by the coincidence he decides to go back and look it over, especially after the bit of newspaper vanishes without a trace. The two friends go over to the house, the Wallmüllerhaus, where they find a strange, ancient-looking man they call dwarf, named Maurus. He claims to have been the servant of the last owner, Ephraim Wallmüller, and to have stood by when his master held private music soirees with E.T. Hoffmann. When the two friends point out the tiny discrepancy of Hoffmann having died 100 years ago, Maurus affirms he is 120 years old. He then takes them around the house, and shows them a mysterious, masterful painting of a beautiful woman that both men find irresistible. Paying the man 20,000 marks deposit, the two move into the boarding house next door. There Barner sees the woman from the train, Erna Schauer, who is the niece of the woman running the boarding house, and he begins to be very romantically obsessed with her. Not that she really ever has anything to do with the plot. The old lady at the boarding house is very shocked when she finds out who sold them the house, and mentions how 100 years ago, people found Ephraim Wallmüller stabbed to death in the street, but also having grown young by several decades. Not that it ended up helping much. On a later day, Barner and North go over to the house, and find out the house is being sold by someone different. The 85-year-old antiquarian thinks they're trying to rob him, and are making up a fanciful story when the 20,000 deposit arrives via the post from someone anonymous. But when they enter the house, they find the contract Maurus had them sign lying on the floor. Soon enough, the two friends discover Maurus, and he is very much not a spirit of any sort. He takes the two to a room containing a painting of his late master, and tells them of his alchemical research, and the strange culmination thereof. 100 years ago, Dr. Wallmüller became obsessed with a strange multicolored bird in a window display, so much so he freed it in secret, then followed it over mountains and the ocean, winding up in the desert. There, the two save an old beggar, who turns out to be a wizard possessing the elixir of youth. He shows his thanks by giving this same to Wallmüller, who becomes young again. He and Maurus are separated and reunited at the old house, where Wallmüller and Hoffmann proceed to play satanic music, observed and applauded to by an array of demonic beings, while secreting an ancient mummy somewhere in the house, because Wallmüller fell in love with it. That is before the doctor is killed by a jealous Frenchman. And now 100 years later, Barner and North are there to reenact the tragedy, at the instigation of Maurus. Seeing that they look exactly like Ephraim Wallmüller and his close friend, even wearing the same clothes the two wore the very night Wallmüller died. And that's not accounting for the mysterious American who speaks too good French to actually be American, according to North.